Is there a next slide? There we go. Before we get into the Talking, Listening, Connecting specifically, we do want to acknowledge that Project Humanities is based in Arizona State University, that is geographically situated on ancestral lands of indigenous people, past, present, and future. And we thank and honor the Native American tribes and sovereign nations of the Salt River Valley, including the Akamo-Otham, the Onk-Akamo-Otham, and Peepash nations, whose stewardship of this land and these waterways allows us to be here now. In addition, we honor their continued and many contributions today. So we hope that our land acknowledgement is just not an empty statement, that we do try to learn from, listen to, and be with our indigenous neighbors. Next. Oops. We want to situate Project Humanities around, as I said, the talking, listening, connecting, however we define that. A little bit of TLC. We've seen great possibilities when people talk, listen, and potentially connect. And it's around this umbrella that we call Humanity 101. So if our team would put that tiny URL in the chat, that would be great, where we try to practice, try to understand, try to live, try to connect through these values: compassion, empathy, forgiveness, integrity, kindness, respect, and self-reflection. They seem so simple. But the beauty of these 7 principles is that it's not a course, not something you have to sign up. It's just a foundation. And it can be a foundation for diversity. The bad D word could be a conversation for justice, and ultimately humanity. None of the other things, whether it's individuals or organizations, can thrive and be their best without some acknowledgement of these principles. So please, please, please feel free to take our pledge. We'd love to continue this as a movement where we are both validating, documenting the best that is humanity, when in fact the headlines and the news stories remind us that we are not always being our best selves. So thank you for coming. I'm going to step out of the way. We do want you to engage in the chat. We will be following as you're sort of engaging in the chat. Tell us where you're joining us from, and then I will turn it over to our facilitator tonight, Ace. And thank you all panelists for being here.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to have today. I'm so excited to learn. And then yeah, my name's Ace. I'm an astrologer, but today I'm going to be facilitating a conversation between a couple of people who I'm going to introduce. And first we have Mandisa Thomas, who is the founder and president of Black Non-Believers. Although never formally indoctrinated into belief, Mandisa was heavily exposed to Christianity, Black nationalism, and Islam. And she has appeared on CBS Sunday Morning, CNN.com, Playboy, The Humanist, Jet magazines. And she's also the recipient of multiple awards, including the 2022 Wolfson Award, co-recipient of the 2020 Harvard Humanist of the Year. So I'm pretty psyched to talk with Mandisa. We also have Erica Medina, who is a spiritual coach, a shamanic practitioner, and intuitive, based in Phoenix, Arizona. And she specializes in helping others restore balance in mind, body, and spirit through womb healing, traditional limpias, ancestral reconnection, and transformational coaching programs that bring clarity, peace of mind, and direction within self. I'm pretty psyched to be hearing about that today. So third, we have Christopher Marmolejo, who was born and raised in San Bernardino, California, in community with the Serrano people of the Pines, the Yuha-Viatam clan of the San Manuel Nation. As a trained educator committed to cultivating classrooms of emancipatory possibility, they work with students around the world to plant and nurture the seeds of a divinatory practice, finally weaving tarot, astrology, curanderismo, and decolonial queer epistemology homologies and critical feminist pedagogies. And they're also the author of Red Tarot, which was published by North Atlantic Books. So I'm pretty psyched. And then we have also Isis Jones, who's a writer, educator, and a spiritual justice worker, nearly 20 years of experience advancing racial and gender equity through culturally grounded research, organizing, and program design. And she has led national and global initiatives focused on health equity, mental wellness, and narrative justice, and served as executive director of the Women of Color Breast Cancer Survivors Support Project. Her work is centered on liberation and spiritual futurism. So as you can see, we have a pretty cool cast today. And then I'm just really interested in how everyone got into what you do, your spiritual practice, because a lot of what you do is like, it's very like, it's not something that you're like, hey, mom, dad, I'm gonna, do this now. When you're very young, you got there through life experience. So I wanted to hear a little bit about that. Yeah, and can you tell us a little about how you came to your spiritual practice? Was it something that was passed down, rediscovered, self-taught? Was there something you had to return to, or did it feel like moving forward? Yeah.
I guess I can start. So thank you once again for the lovely introductions, and thank you to everyone who has tuned in. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So having been born and raised in New York City, and being raised and introduced to like Black Afrocentric, being Afrocentric, raised with an awareness about, basically social, racial justice and other things that impact Black communities in particular. My upbringing was very much rooted in education and very much surrounding awareness about our surroundings. And so that also included a lot of reading different forms of mythology. I was raised around people who were spiritual. I myself identified as spiritual for a while. I grew up learning early on about how Christianity in particular was helpful, but also detrimental to the Black community. And so that really helped inform my perspective, reading Greek mythology, Norse mythology, African mythology. So understanding that there were different cultural beliefs throughout the world, but also learning about how the Judeo-Christian religions have impacted the world as well. So it was with that knowledge, it was with that information, but also very much a close connection to my community, and also to the people around me, and being able to understand that some of us hold opinions and perspectives that aren't necessarily accepted. And I think being able to connect on that with others really, really helped. The first time I said I was an atheist, I acknowledged that I was 14. Someone asked me if I was. And when I asked what that meant, I was told I didn't believe in heaven or hell. And the more I thought about it, I'd always tried to reconcile the concept of an afterlife. But I never could, because there was no evidence for it. Nothing that could really be, put into an actual, framework of evidence. And so for a while, I continued to identify as spiritual, but the more I learned and the more I was able to understand my upbringing, I realized that atheism was not, or being an atheist was not a dirty word, and that it really best described who I was. And for no other reason than there are a few reasons, but I will stop there. I'll stop here for now.
I'm like, can I just jump in and kind of ask back to you though, Mandisa, like if you could, like, could you define how, like, atheism in
Sure. So an atheist, by definition, and I tend to expand the definition of someone who does not believe in God, spirits, or supernatural beings as if they exist as we do. To me and to many other atheists, the concepts of God are the same as like God's concepts of God and the devil, right? They are the same as Superman. They're the same as Santa Claus. They're the same as the other cultural gods that have been recorded in different cultures throughout history. So they are relegated to folklore, literature, and things that some people still do believe in, what some folks have previously believed in, but we don't believe in any of them. And some people who were raised deeply religious have come to reject the concepts of God as not being real or being tangible, as to exist as we do.
I'm like, thank you. Definitely. I guess I'll just share next, if that's all right. I grew up culturally Catholic, but it wasn't dogmatic. It was just, like I said, cultural. My parents had me really young at 16. And my mom taught me how to pray. And my relationship with spirit, as I like to say, is with spirit, has been very personal and intimate, where the felt sense of a connection to like the validity of intuition, the validity of an innate knowing, of a sense of when family was in danger, a sense of things needing to be protected, but also a sense of an innate connection to some part of a spirit that is more than a materialist view, that I do think colonialism and forces of white supremacy assault a sense of being anything more than fungible, you know what I mean? Anything more than some product to be sold and exploited, right? And so I never completed catechism or anything like that, you know what I mean? But I had the model of my grandmother praying the rosary. I had the model of my other grandmother who was incarcerated and struggled with addiction, but still had a faith, and then again, my own intimate relationship with just kind of figuring the path out on my own. And so I came to tarot especially as a particularly versatile and spacious technology that allows me to repair my ruptured relationship with spirit, with indigeneity in particular, and to make my spiritual practice a politicized one, where I think on either end, some spiritual practices, especially folks interested in astrology or tarot, new agey, can be completely depoliticized and thus violent, right? Because then nothing is necessarily depoliticized. It just has that veneer to be appropriative, right? Or also a type of illiteracy and consistent divine communication daily, right? Where I get confirmations of this connection with spirit that fortifies me and my spirit against enduring the conditions that we endure. So that's what I would say for now.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. So like you, Chris, for me, I grew up like most, Latino households. We had our, strong faith in, God and, coming from that background. And, for me, I was exposed to religion at a really young age. But then there was always that thing inside of me within my spirit that's like, I feel like there's more to what I've been given. And I remember there being times where, I'm being given something, right? Like the flooding that happened, the ark. And then I would ask questions like, okay, well, what about those little creatures in the sea? What about them? If really everything just flooded and it was wiped out, what about them? And just some of the answers that I would receive just didn't make sense to me. What makes those creatures better than maybe the creatures with 4 legs, the creatures with 2 legs, that walk on the earth? So there was a lot of questioning for me. And then on the other hand, there was these experiences that I would have. I would have these very interesting dreams where I would be told certain things and then I would see them happen. And so, growing up, there was the side of, my family where they were very religious, and then the other side that was very spiritual. And, for that is where my grandmother, she was a very religious woman, but she was also a very spiritual woman, and at 17, 18, we had this conversation where I'm like, Grandma, I have these experiences and I don't really know what to do with them because, if I tell, certain people, they're going to think I'm crazy. And at that time, she really gave me what I needed to hear, that what you have is something that you need to share, that you need to share with the world. You got to really refine it. You really got to, learn what this is, and you got to go and share it with the world. So from that point, I had the religious side, I had the spiritual side. And that kind of led me to my first place, which is my ancestry. If I really want to learn more about myself, what better way can I do that than those that have walked behind me? So, since then, a lot of the work that I do is really focused on that. For me, I can't really say, like when we talk about the word healing, we can't really say that it's just physical. We can't really say that it's just mental, that it's really just energetic, that is really just spiritual, and then a lot of things that we do, and in the work that I do now is really about honoring those that came before us, honoring our ancestry, being in harmony with all the natural elements and being in harmony with the world of the gods. So, for me, I take my background in which I came from, with a lot of pride, that although, I know at some point my ancestors, kind of gave in for survival for what the foreigners brought as far as religion and, colonizations and things like that. But there was a lot of things that were preserved. So for me, there was that part that, was passed on, like doing limpias and energy work and things like that, that was passed on from my ancestors. But then there's a lot that, at some point was left behind. And so, since, 18, 19, I've been on this journey to really find and refine those pieces that were lost, and a lot of that has, like I said, it's been, focusing on the ancestors and focusing on like, okay, what does my lineage bring? What is it what was my family's specialty, and how can I really, bring that forward and pass it on to my children? So, it's been a little bit of both. It's been quite a journey, but it's, very, very rewarding for sure.
And that resonates with me, what you were saying about the difference between religion and spirituality. If I'm to talk about how I came to my particular practice, I always say one of the greatest gifts my mother ever gave me was an introduction to God or spirit world. That was the greatest gift my mother gave me. But at the time that she gave it to, I would say, all of her children, it wasn't in the form of religion that I hear a lot of people talking about. It was really about introducing you to something where you can have deeper relationship. But I always grew up knowing that relationship was my personal responsibility, and that it wasn't something that I could get solely from doctrine or from the faith of another, including her. It was always something like, this is personal for you. You've got to find your own way. And so there became a time in my life when, quite young actually, I think I come from a long line of light workers, they would say, particularly women in my family who have had, quote unquote, certain kinds of gifts. But there became a time in my life, even at a young age, where I realized that I had a spiritual depth that maybe surpassed my mother. And but I did not grow up in a household where it was to be hushed or shunned. In the culture that I grew up in, Black American spiritual faith is what I call it, Black American spirituality, and the faith that I grew up when there was no respect of persons. So whoever had it, you had to respect it, but it tinged on belief. It lived off of belief. So if a child had a dream, there might be somebody who could interpret that dream. And no matter what the age of the person in the household, people respected the truth, regardless of who it came from. And so I think that I hear people having conversations about religion versus spirituality and which one does it mean. And I grew up with Christ principles and the cultural faith that we grew up in, some would call Christianity. But there became a time in my adult life when I wanted to separate myself from saying I was Christian because I felt like there was a washed down version of that did not resonate with how I grew up. We did read the Bible. We did believe in Christ. We did go to church, but that was not the end nor the beginning of our faith practice. And I think that I hear the conversations that people are having now, colonialism, everyone's talking about a lot of the church hurt and a lot of the pain and oppression that came with the way people practice religion. But I, like you, recognize that you cannot talk about someone's faith practice outside of their cultural context. And so for me, I would say it was different. Yeah, that's my introduction to it.
I'm so interested in this conversation we're having about culture and spirituality, and then culture as religion. And I see people in the chat talk about their experiences too, because when I hear all of you talk, I hear your relationships with your family members, in how you began with spirituality, your mom, your grandmas. So I have two questions now for you, because I'm also very aware that when I talk to the four of you, that you're people who support a whole bunch of other people, so community. So that's kind of two different relationships with community. So it's like, yeah, so my first question is, how does your spiritual work connect you with your ancestry or cultural identity? Like, how do you receive support from your culture as you do the work that you do? But then also, how does your spiritual practices support community care, not just individual wellness? So like, where does the switch happen when you decide, hey, like, I'm receiving from my grandma, my mom, my culture, and then I get to decide what that culture means. I get to support others. I'm really interested in that switch.
So I'd like to start with that because one person who was very influential to my life as well as to my work was my maternal grandmother, Ethel May Welch. She is the reason why I celebrate Thanksgiving every year, but also, and I take into account the extremely damaging version of the American Thanksgiving, but also incorporating it into understanding that harvest celebrations are common throughout the world, whether it was among the indigenous people, whether it was among Africans, they are common throughout the world. So Thanksgiving celebrations are quite common. And my grandmother she loved celebrating holidays. She had 11 children, and there would be a big Thanksgiving every year. So even in my mother taking my brothers and I to the cultural center, to the library, Thanksgiving was one of the holiday, that was the main holiday where we would get together with our family. And Easter was always celebrated with not with God, but it was with the Easter bunny, it was with the candy, and that was because she knew that was what the kids liked. And that it was very much rooted in the love for her children and her grandchildren and the people around her. My grandmother was kind. She was, she was just this person who everyone just loved. Her nickname was Sadie. And so I take her and the love that she poured into us. And she was from New Orleans, so she could cook. And so knowing I take that, remembering my grandmother and the love that she shared and the space that she had, and she wasn't a perfect woman, recognizing her humanity and the humanity that she shared with others. And she respected my aunts and uncles and wherever they were. I have aunts, I have family members who are Christian, I have family members who are Muslim, some who are atheists as well. So I have that. I definitely take what is, so it's not necessarily separate. I think where I try to separate that, I incorporate that into my community work with especially with the members of my organization, with the team members that I shout out to Cynthia, who's here from our Chicago affiliate. I try to embody what Ethel May instilled with her, you know, with her love for her cooking, with her love for, you know, just her family and just her respect for people. And just, you know, that is because she is someone who I know existed. I was raised with her, and it is taking from the people I know who actually, you know, who actually instilled that, and historic as well. I think for there were many historic African American as well as overall atheist, humanistic, Gnostics who contributed a lot to the world, but yet their legacy, that part of their legacy is diminished, and it shouldn't be. And that is a part of taking our power back. Also understanding that there has always been diversity within our communities, whether there were people who were deeply religious or spiritual or even non-religious, but that we share practices and we share principles in common. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from a framework of, you know, if it comes from that framework of spirituality or some sort of other entity for you, then it is to be respected. But for those of us who don't, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes from people who we've known to exist. I've had teachers who I had mentors who I take lessons from as well. But one of the primary influence on my life and my activism is my grandmother, and I share her in my activism, and I share her with our communities.
I think I call myself a spiritual justice worker because what I learned about justice and justice work really came out of my spiritual practice and my cultural understanding of spirituality. My grandmother and all of the mothers of the church or the aunties, those were the first women I saw who put food plates together and pulled money together to take women to the prison to see their loved ones, you know, whether it be their partners or their children or their sons or whatever. So that was my first time seeing that. And there was a kind of obligation to those in the community who had, like, the concept of a susu or pooling money together and collective economics. That came from passing a collection plate and or inside the building and outside the building when there was a need. So yeah, and I have found that my line of work has kind of gone like this. I talked to Dr. Lester about it. It's never been a straight line. It's been like something like this. But the through line for me has been righting some kind of wrong in the space or opening up a platform for someone else to speak advocacy on some level. So it's directly tied to, for me, my spiritual understanding. And I got that understanding because these were women and men who were interpreting justice through the lens of biblical principles. So that's how I came to my work as a spiritual justice worker.
Alice, you're going to have to redirect me back to the question. I kind of lost it.
Yeah. The question is, when you draw from your culture, from your family, and then when was the point when you decided to be someone who's like, I'm gonna decide on what my culture is. I'm going to use it to support other people now. And then what that was like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can't really say that I decided my culture, because it's something that already existed before me. My job is really just to investigate the pieces that have been lost and bring them back. So, when it really comes to culture and the community, for me, my work is, we first have to stabilize ourselves. We really first have to get clear on like, what is it that we're even doing here? What's my why? Why am I here? Why are you here? Why are we all here? And really getting clear on that, and for me, it is really getting clear on what that blueprint or that internal compass is going to be and why. So then you learn how to have direction. You learn to know what's for you, why, what's not for you, and why. And, ultimately, I'll say for the children, right, for the next generation, because if we're really going to be talking about, community or even legacy, I know at one point, it's going to be my time to go. And it's really like, what is it that through my work and through I'm doing is what am I really passing on to my children? So they can continue to keep that strong, and they know who I am and all the work that I've done here to really collect the things that have been lost so they continue to do that. So, really, I think when it comes to my work, it's really about, stabilizing ourselves but then also, to really focus on the family. Right, because when we're strong, the family can be strong. When the family's strong, the community can be strong, and that's everything, right? So it's really kind of coming back to what's really the important thing, because I think in this society, there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of things that keep us so emotional, so angry, so disappointed, so frustrated, right? Whether it's like just being in traffic, or, this thing that's happening with this person, or, whatever's going on, right? We can turn the TV on right now and we can find a reason to be upset. But it's like, how is that really serving us? When we really think about what's my why and how does, my thoughts, my actions, my words, everything align with that goal. So, I can really say a lot about this, but I don't want to take up the whole time talking about it. But, to kind of keep it simple, is it's about the children. It's about, the future generations and really what we're doing now to support that.
I love that, Erica. I mean, my background is I was a 7th and 8th grade English teacher. I was a K-12 tutor and substitute teacher. I had seniors. So the children were definitely a big part of my entry into the work as an educator, which I didn't at the time, see as a spiritual practice. Do you know what I mean? Like the spiritual part wasn't there yet necessarily. It was private, but it was a calling, and I think a lot of I love the framing, the language, like Ace, with deciding our culture, because I am in contention with my community and where I come from. There's parts of, I think that's constantly where I'm trying to interrogate, and you were speaking on this, Erica, with a sense of integrity. Where are the internal contradictions? And so a lot of the work that I do with, and communal contradictions, and where do our struggles, or we may be collectively against white supremacy and fascism, does not mean that our stances, our viewpoints, our histories are the same, though we're similarly structured by white supremacy. Indigenous, a lot of my work looks to focus again on finding a sense of communion between Black women communities, Black communities, but Black women communities especially, between queer people, between trans people, between Latino cultures, between Native cultures, because I have Native community that is transphobic. I have Black female students who are invested in the American project and capitalism. I have, you know what I mean? I have white female students that have internalized racism. just because we may be of a similar background does not mean that we are just if only inherited good, and that we don't have internalized structures of oppression that are operating within our communities. And so I'm thinking about my own chart and how this kind of reflects on my chart, because I'm also an astrologer, but I think a lot of my work is to be in contention, and that those contradictions point to where my work is through the lens of a literacy, through this demand of rigor. Like, I consider the citational work that I do in my book is a type of ancestral practice, and it's a type of a chosen ancestors, where being displaced, internally displaced as a Native person within Americas, right, and having compressed layering of nation states that you're supposed to identify with in order to find a sense of community and belonging, like, oh, we're Mexican, oh no, we're Native, oh no, we're American, or et cetera, right? In the rupture of indigeneity, for me, that aligns to a diasporic, like there's a kindred with a diasporic experience there. And so a lot of my saints, if you will, like sainted number one is Bell Hooks, Toni Morrison, I draw a lot and have learned a lot from the brilliance and the revelation that their writing and their thinking brings forth. And for me, it was important to name that as spiritual work. Obviously, they talk about spirituality and faith and religion a lot in their work, but they're not necessarily preaching in the church. So I think that sometimes those recognitions go unseen or unsaid. And again, the citational work in my book is to say, we have all this history of people that maybe aren't ostensibly call themselves spiritual workers, but are, right? And so,
Can I say thank you for that? Because I do think that although it is our job sometimes as spiritual workers or as humanists, right? Sometimes it's our job to call those things that were left behind, but it is also our job to chisel and to evolve and to push past where we are now. Not everything that came with us was great, right? As we grow and we evolve, I hear a lot of people talking about, including myself, church hurt and all kinds of religious trauma and damage that they've encountered as a result of quote unquote religious or spiritual people, and as a means for leaving. Right. But I also think that there needs to be people who redefine that. There needs to be the new storytellers, the new griots, the new workers, the new people who say, no, this is where we are now. It is not a singular one kind of idea thing that happened at one particular time that we must carry on forever, other than to carry on the spirit and the principle of the thing that kept us going eternally. So yes, thank you for that. I just want to say good work.
I'm so glad we're talking about the different contradictions of what we do, what we've seen modeled for us, the contradictions between different people who we are in relationship with when we are practicing our spirituality. And then as you're navigating that, there's all these myths, misconceptions, because everyone is bringing, I love your term, Isis, is church hurt, just that religious trauma that kind of maybe just emotional story that we tell ourselves about what we believe. And then there's misrecognitions. So I wanted to ask y'all, what are some myths or misconceptions about your practice that you wish more people understood? And then how do you navigate that too? Yeah.
Oh gosh, I was hoping I didn't have to start this first again. But I think I should, because first of all, there is a huge misconception, especially in communities of color and among marginalized communities, that atheism is something that white people do, that there aren't any Black atheists that exist or that we've never existed. And I would like to quote an ancestor, Butterfly McQueen, the actress Butterfly McQueen, who was famously in Gone with the Wind. She famously said, "As my ancestors are free from slavery, I am free from the slavery known as religion." Now, we can talk about, yes, I will say that the thing about people being damaged or hurt by church as well as church leaders and practitioners is so valid. It is absolutely valid. And we're talking about it from an institutional framework. It has created a psychosis in our communities, and it has created internalized white supremacy, internalized misogynoir. And so what I think I would say, and I can't speak for every non-believer, I can't speak for every atheist and humanist, or even Black atheist and humanist, but I can firmly say that in my position as the leader of this organization, who has helped people find their voice, who have helped people become more affirmed with their non-religious perspective. And that has to be okay for people who still believe. It doesn't mean that you have to give up a part of yourself or that you have to become defensive because we say we don't believe. And that's what we come across a lot. We come across that a lot as atheists and non-believers. It's that, especially within our communities, is that there is this automatic defense, and people do get emotional about the fact that many of us have come to our position, some of it has come from the questions that you had, Isis, right? And that you had, Erica, and also Chris. Something about those fundamental and the Judeo-Christian religions, as we were raised with them, there was something wrong with it, right? And we're here to say that's valid, no matter where you end up. That is totally valid. The point is that so many people have been taught not to question it at all. And there has to be a balance. There's always more than one way to come to the education, the information, as well as your self-identity. And if that means that you let it go altogether, but still recognize that there is a cultural importance to it, then that's totally fine. But I think that there is this idea that, again, that atheists have no sense of value, that we have no sense of morals, that we just want to do whatever it is that we want to do. But I'm here to tell you that it is, for many people, it is very, very difficult to take responsibility for our actions and to understand that it is just us here. As human beings, we have a responsibility to make this world better and to make our communities better and to uphold aspects of our culture and our community that we can take with us and move it forward. And I think about my own children. I think about the fact that because I was raised in an abusive home as well. So I wanted to make sure that my children that they were able to not just simply model what I did, but that they are their own individuals, and that as their mother, I'm here to guide them, not control them. They have to be able to make their decisions for themselves, but also recognize that they have a part to play in the world. That is extremely important. And that actually I think there are many atheists who do, and humanists who do so much good for the world, but they do it because it's the right thing to do. And we do so because, again, these things are important, how we connect, but we also understand that we have the right to stand in our identity without anyone feeling like it is an affront or some sort of disrespect to them. I think it's very important for people to understand that everyone's journey is different. Some of it may come from trauma. Some of it may come just simply from taking in the information and education. Some people study their way right out, and that's okay. I think there's such and that some of us, and I have to say that many of my fellow non-believers can work on our social skills a lot more because we're so used to being othered or feeling othered. And many of us may have these social anxieties, but through clinical help, through therapy. And I would preface that by saying that if you can find someone who is closer to your cultural identity, then that's great. But definitely, I think it is a responsibility for all of us to, if there is someone with a different perspective, to try to learn as much about it as possible, even if you don't agree with it. Because you never know what type of common ground you may find with other, with other folks. Because many of us I'm hearing so much that we have in common in here on this panel. We just have different perspectives. And, but those are just a few of the, some of the misconceptions especially about Black atheists and non-believers and humanists that we are trying to reject, or that we are rejecting our identity, when in fact that couldn't be, for many of us, it's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, as one of my teachers always said, we could always learn something from everyone, right? Even if that cashier lady is trying to talk to me, or that guy on the street, there's always something. It's good to stop and listen to what they have to say. We can always learn something if we have that open mind and that non-judgment is really what I'm hearing, right? Because when we have that perception of I'm right and you're wrong, or, you're right and I'm wrong, that really just, we just become separated. We just, at that point, there's really nothing that we can share with each other. But I'm going to take a sharp turn on that. For me, in kind of the more recent years that I've been really focusing in my practice is the importance of womb health. And, I see a big part of the work that I do is womb rebalancing through yoni steaming, through womb energy work. I also offer a holistic alternative to fertility. And, a lot of women that I'm seeing, have a lot of reproductive issues. And it's really because we don't have the right knowledge and wisdom about, the full identity of what the womb is and how it really, the importance of taking care of it. Just like any other organ, we really have to ensure that it's getting cleansed on a regular basis, so that there's a lot, right? It's energetic, it's spiritual, it's physical. So that's really one of the things in the more recent years is I've been, really pushing out more awareness on that and more education on that, and really what does that even mean? So it's one of the things in my practice that I wish was more known, instead of like, okay, no period for 6 months. Okay, let's go ahead and get you on birth control. That'll fix that. Or versus someone, trying to conceive. Okay, let's get you on all this, hormones and medications, but you haven't had a period in, 2 years, no problem. It's really about getting educated on that so we can stop normalizing things like PCOS, infertility, and all the different things that are really common nowadays, which technically aren't when we're really talking about the health of a human being. But yeah, that's one of the things that I've really been working on these last several years, is really getting that education and that awareness on how we can really take our health, when we're talking about healing, to the next level, and really taking the initiative to really do that.
Can I ask both Erica and Chris a question? Can I come in? About your practice, because both of you guys were talking about using things, more than one element in your practice of faith. You were talking about tarot. You were also talking about womb health, which getting people on herbs or medicine or medicinal health. Can you talk to us just a little bit about the faith, or your faith practice being multidimensional in that sense, using more than just belief or heart? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Erica, do you want to? Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, I always say with all of it, I'm like I'm maximalist in my approaches to healing, you know what I mean, and wellness. And having a lot of space around me growing up to kind of figure out my faith and whatnot. I mean, I think of that like, there's like an Oprah interview where she's like, until you've been brought to your knees, you know what I mean? And like her Oprah voice, like, do you understand that? Like, I was like, as I do this work, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Like, you know, I'm not really like, I know Bible stories and verses and things like that, but I've not read the Bible cover to cover or anything like that. But I'm like, oh, I get it. You need a Holy Spirit with you when you're doing this work at times. Like, you need an extra something to draw on. And it's called other things, right? But that, again, in the maximalist approach, I think I answer what is called or what appears. You know, like when the teachers appear in that form, tarot is like kind of the locus for me in a lot of ways, but having the need, it's really, I think there's a sense of a need where like drawing from curanderismo and going into community members' homes and places of business and doing work to clear out energy from violent intrusions by addicted, drunk men who are coming in and harassing the space, and doing spell work and protection work to expel that energy, to cleanse it. And it's real, like, you know what I mean? Like, you see, like, in the process of this kind of purging exorcist type of work, the effect that has, like, immediately and then ongoing. I think, again, I'm always trying to apply a depth theoretical lens to the work as well, because when a card comes up, I'm like, oh, this is a card about code switching, or this becomes like, I'm able to kind of deepen the interpretation or the reading that card has. And then for me, like, the tarot is an archive of archives. And so it's prismatic. There's a different layer that we can read to it or draw medicine from it. And then as I continue to work with it, I'm just adding to that archive in that way. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, for me, it's always kind of, I find it challenging sometimes to really describe, everything that I do. A lot of times it's kind of just first looking at the person, and really seeing what the dialogue there is like, in the material and in the non-material. And then really just going there, because sometimes, it's really like that person just needs to heal their mindset. Sometimes it could be spiritual, there could be something on that person that is causing them to have some bad luck, and they really just need to cleanse, whatever they have going on. For other people, it's like, you really just need to cleanse your body. You need to detox your body, all your organs inside there, just because we can't see them doesn't mean that, they're not doing things. They can be struggling, yeah, there's a lot as far as for me, but in that first, usually when I am speaking with a new client, we'll do that initial conversation, and I'm listening to what they're saying, and then on through words, and then I'm also listening to what's happening around them, because that's really kind of like what gives me more information about what they really have, because they might think it's like, an emotional problem, but it might be a spiritual problem that they're having. So it's like, like I said at some point at the beginning, healing is not just one layer. We can't just say that it's physical only. We can't just say that it's spiritual only. We can't say that it's just, emotional only, it's all of it. So for some, it kind of just depends on like what, how far you want to go, what's really the thing that you're struggling with. For some people, it could be yoni steaming, it could be energy work, it could be coaching, right? So there's a lot, but, what I will say to, all of my clients, regardless on what they're coming in for, is, there always is some suggestion of herbs. There's always like a principle, like just that will come in for them. Like, hey, you just really have to detach from, these people, and what they're saying to you, and, the emotion that's causing inside of you, sometimes, is different things. So it's really kind of, one of those things that you have to experience, I'd say. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I'll say is, healing as far as my knowledge and background. It's a technical skill. There are certain things, certain process that we do in addition to, whatever else might be going on, if it's emotional, if it's energetic, stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on.
So yeah, I mean, we have just 5 minutes left, and I just have one more question for all of you, and then I'd love to hear you answer in one sentence from everyone. And the question is, what's one thing about healing that has helped you dream about the future for your practice, your community, your lineage? What's one thing about healing that's just helped you conceptualize the future is possible? Yeah.
You said one sentence for that one.
It can have 2 sentences if you want.
Well, let me say that the reason I asked you guys that question is because I do feel like, for me, if we're talking healing, I do feel like for me, my spiritual practice, which is rooted in my ancestral truth, right? The healing is not singular. It is, it's metaphysical also. So it requires not just my belief, it requires also my action. I grew up where you had to refrain from certain foods. I just told my children, we did Make It Happen Thursday, where we would just fast. And I didn't fully understand as a child, but I know now that it was 3 parts. I have to take some things away. I have to add some action to my stuff. I have to be accountable to others, as Mandisa said earlier. And I also must heal that mental, emotional trauma, which means correcting some of that, family stuff, right? So healing for me is multifaceted and really hard work.
As I would like to say that healing should be on your terms. It has to be your journey. It has to be what definitely works best for you so that you can be better for others.
And then if you're viewing or in the audience, you have the answers to the question, just 1 or 2 sentences you want to share, go ahead and put in the chat too.
Yeah, for me, healing is really looking at everything that is with you. So that's everything behind you and, also everything that's in front of you.
I mean, this is so hard, Ace. Oh my goodness. I like healing. Something I'm taking from healing that. Can you frame the question one more time? I'm sorry.
Just something, even something silly about healing that's just help you dream about the future, even if it's something that just you're like, hey, I went through that. I had a dream that night.
Yeah, I think, even as you're saying that, it frees me from being stuck in the grief of the past. So while I may not have, hope for a future may be hard and fragile and hard to kill, as suspect as I am of any being too hopeful and then disappointed, I also become neutral, which feels like healing, having been a survivor of trauma and abuse and and all of the collective hurt. And so I think that healing has helped me just come to a neutral place also. I'm like, are you gonna say Ace too? I feel like you gotta answer that question.
Oh no, I didn't have an answer. Healing helps you. Healing helps you move a little slower.
Okay.
So is healing a static? Or is healing something that's ongoing and is it like getting a certificate? Like now you're healed?
No, the one thing I like to always say, I mean, I have these discussions with folks all the time that healing is not, there are some aspects of healing that you're never going to get over. You work through them. And that has to be something that we have to be comfortable with when we are healing. And that also has to be something that others have to be comfortable with as well. Because one thing I will say that I'm sure as like practitioners and there are some people who look to you to just heal them. And it's like, no, that cannot, I can help you, but that work has to be yours.
Internal, yeah.
So yeah, it's like, how do we even as, you know, just people who look to us, it's like, how do we handle that for ourselves, which can be very difficult at times.
You know, it's interesting when you said that, Mandisa, I kept thinking of joy. Healing makes space for joy. And that's not, joy is not a destination, but joy is sort of a movement toward that something. And so it's hard to experience joy as a resource that we have if we have not experienced some sort of healing from whatever that trauma or that loss or that disappointment is. So I see a nice connection between healing and joy. So well, I have certainly experienced some joy tonight in this conversation. You all were really, really insightful. I think there was a nice combination and balance of perspectives here. And something tells me that y'all are going to reach out to each other now.
No.
And see, that is something that we can't even choreograph when these panels are put together. So that to me is its own joy. And the fact that I know that people are going to be, this was a very live and active chat going on tonight. What we will be doing is sending out some resources to those who signed up but who couldn't necessarily come, but also those who came. And if there are particular resources that all of you want to recommend, because we don't want this to be the end of a conversation, but rather the door that opens the conversation. And I know for a fact that some of you are going to connect, and I know some of the people who came tonight are going to connect with you as well. And we could not ask for anything more than that. We did not solve any of the world's problems, but we created a moment of joy that cannot be replicated. So I thank you all. I thank my team. I want everybody to know that Project Humanities, as a university initiative, conducts these kinds of conversations all the time. And each, I guarantee you, when you walk in thinking one way or feeling one way, it is likely that you're going to walk out feeling something else. And we hope uplifted and inspired and challenged, but also wanting more. So thank you all who came tonight. And please, if you enjoyed what you heard, saw, said, please follow us on all the socials and tell somebody about it. You know, it's amazing how word of mouth can be the best marketing. And we hope to stay in contact with all of you panelists so that we can further promote and amplify the excellent work that you're all doing. All right. Thank you.
That was so good. All right, bye.